Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Futurists Symposium, the future of technology, the arts, and design. And welcome to Imagine RIT, our Creativity and Innovation Festival. Before we get started with the symposium, I want to thank you all for attending Imagine RIT. Today we're featuring 354 exhibits from 2,200 exhibitors. And it's about more than just tech. There are a lot of arts that are on display, including the performing arts, and I think you are going to be really blown away by all the hard work that our enterprising students, faculty, and staff have undertaken in order to put this together. And so after this symposium, I invite you all to explore the entire campus. Almost any building you walk into is full of exhibits, and try hard to make it down to the field house. That's kind of ground central. I think you'll have a grand time down there. You're going to be discovering RIT Tigers shaping the future and improving the world through creativity and innovation at the intersection of technology, the arts, and design. The festival's mission is really to inspire the next generation of problem solvers by connecting young people to the wonders of science, technology, engineering, math, the arts, design, business, the health sciences, and also the liberal arts. We put a high value in bringing goodness to the world, and you will be hearing directly from our panelists momentarily on that front. First, let me take a moment to introduce our interpreters. We have Jennifer Horak and also Lola Johnston, so thank you. Appreciate your services. And let me also thank our sponsors for this event, WXXI, City Magazine, and Liberty Mutual Insurance, as well as RIT's own Magic Spell Studios, which has provided this wonderful facility for our event today. At RIT, we're always on to the next big thing. Before we get started about the future, I want to thank our 4 leading innovators and futurists for joining us today. They include our best and brightest alumni, and in order of their presentations, let's please welcome Luiz Freitas. Luiz is from the class of 2007. He earned a BS in economics from the College of Liberal Arts, and he is Vice President of Experience Personalization at Fidelity Investments. Next up will be Christine Ramage. Christine is from the class of 95. She graduated with a BFE in Professional Photographic Illustration from the College of Art and Design. She is Vice President of Photography for Paramount Plus. And then Josh Klenert from class of 1996, who earned a BFA in graphic design, also from the College of Art and Design. He is the Chief Design Officer at a company you may not have heard about, but he can tell you about it, called BACT. And last but not least is Dmitri Becker from the class of 2007. Dmitri earned his BS and MS in computer engineering from the Kate Gleason College of Engineering. Dmitri is an embedded systems engineer at the Applied Physics Lab at Johns Hopkins University. You'll hear more about their impressive backgrounds in just a moment, but let me now introduce our esteemed moderator, Evan Dawson. Evan joined WXXI Radio, which is so well known here in our local area. It is our PBS station. He joined WXXI in 2014. He's the host of Connections, the weekday NPR program that focuses on all of the major issues of the day for the greater Rochester and Finger Lakes. I have a whole page of other things I wanted to tell you about Evan, but he wouldn't let me do it. He wants to get onto the program. So thanks to all for being with us today. And Evan, before I turn it over, I have just one big question for the audience. Are you ready to experience the future? Let's do it.
There's a great video of Arthur C. Clarke talking about the future, talking about how eventually no one will ever get lost again because we will have maps at our fingertips digitally. And the interviewer looked at him as if to say, map reading is a skill we will always need. And Arthur C. Clarke said, eventually not anymore. And thank goodness for me, I couldn't find my way out of a paper bag. I traveled about 8 miles to get here and used every bit of digital technology to get here. It's pretty quick how technology changes culture, changes our expectations. Louis C.K. famously joked that how quickly we feel entitled to technology we didn't know existed 10 seconds ago. It moves very fast. And so, yes, we're talking about the future, but I don't know about you, but recently the future feels a lot closer. We'll talk about AI later, and some of the presentations will include AI. But the future is becoming the present more quickly than I expected, at least in my lifetime. I think about my son, who is 11 years old. It is not easy to predict what kind of technological future exists for him when he's my age. But we know it's very different than it is now. Our wonderful panelists today, their backgrounds, their resumes are remarkable. They're a credit to this institution and to the work that they did on this campus, and now to the work that they're doing here and, frankly, serving people in this country and around the world. So let's talk about it. Let's get on with the program, I think. And in terms of the technology and the design, every one of our panelists comes from a slightly different field, but you're going to see a lot of similar elements here. We're starting with Luiz Freitas. Luiz is Vice President of Experience Personalization at Fidelity Investments. He is an analytics leader and personalization expert. Prior to his work at Fidelity, he held analytics and leadership positions at Google, Amazon, and Digitas. Freitas is on the board of RIT's Alumni Association. He's a founding member of RIT's Sentinel Society. This year, he was awarded the Distinguished Alumni Award from RIT's College of Liberal Arts. In addition to his economics degree from RIT, Freitas earned a master's degree in environmental economics from the University of Illinois at Urbana-Champaign and completed graduate courses in predictive analytics at Northwestern University. Unfortunately, that is all. But we're going to see a lot more from Luiz. Welcome.
All right. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. We have 5 to 7 minutes to go through some of these kind of prepared presentations and materials. I think I'll tell you a little bit more about myself. You just heard about my education, so we can breeze through that. And my work has focused on advertising and marketing data science. I'm a publicist at Google and Amazon, and now in personalization at Fidelity Investments. I figured I'd start by telling you a little bit about what is personalization, because it's kind of a mysterious word if you're not working in that space. So this little model that you see here, this is something that McKinsey uses to talk about personalization, the consultancy, to their clients. So I can take no credit for it, but it's a nice way of thinking about it. So personalization is the process of taking what you know about your customers and taking that all the way through making decisions about what to show them, about what they need, understanding what they need through that data, designing content assets, as they're called, that speak to the needs of those customers, and then reaching those people through the right channels to get in front of them and tell them that maybe you have a valuable offer for them, a valuable proposition for them. Today, I want to talk a little bit about the design piece of this and how changes in artificial intelligence, advances in artificial intelligence, especially in the past, let's call it 12 to 24 months, are transforming the space. We're living through a breakout moment for AI. And the really interesting thing about what's happening now is that it's accessible to more people than ever. OpenAI, the company behind ChatGPT, really struck a chord with the world when they wrapped their large language model, GPT-3, in a chat interface, meaning that anybody can go to a web browser and ask that model for literally anything. Now they're putting some guardrails around it. Or initially it was anything, and that was a little bit scary. But this is happening in all kinds of other places, right? Meta has Llama. Other companies have drummed up their own models. And that's just in the text-to-text space. We also have huge advances in text images, and I'm really trying to simplify, not get into how these things work, but essentially you can tell a model what you want to see, what you want to generate in terms of an image, and it'll spit out that image back to you, probabilistically. So you have to be very specific about what you want to see. And this is changing what it means to be creative. So if you look at a picture like this, over to the, I guess your right, you'll see the prompt that was used to generate the image. So a group of male, Norse, Dane, and Vikings huddled together, et cetera, taking a selfie together in 793 CE. So everything here is just describing what this image, what the prompter wanted from the image. And at the very end, you see some kind of additional code almost to give the image certain formatting and so on. But this is it. This is all that was needed to generate this image. This person didn't do any editing. They didn't open up Photoshop. Nothing, right? And this is incredible. So if you're somebody who works in this space now, your work has changed radically, and not in ways that everybody loves. So if you saw doing this sort of work, say design, editing, et cetera, as creative work, as a craftsperson's work, then you're going to be very disappointed with how the future work looks. Because now the robot is doing a lot of the things that you might have thought as being your core skills. And this is really obvious in this case for editing, photo editing, but it's actually going to be true across all of our industries. I think if you're somebody who's not looking to retire in the next couple of years, we're all going to have to learn how to work with AI. Right? We're going to be working alongside it almost regardless of our fields. But it's not just changing the way the creativity looks. The kind of creativity that you can pull out from these models is very specific and often not in ways that are obvious. So here you see a bunch of other images generated from similar prompts. These, I think, are pirates in the Caribbean. There's soldiers in Egypt. This is a selfie in the trenches of World War I, Roman soldiers. And what do you notice about this when you look at these pictures? They're all smiling, and they're all smiling the same way. This kind of toothy, like high cheek, right, smile. This is because of biases in the training data. Everybody in the images that were used to train these models was smiling in this kind of toothy, it's been called the American smile sort of way. And if you don't tell the model that you want the smile to look a certain way, by default, it gives you how people smile in selfies. So this is all over these data sets. And it's not obvious. Sometimes it's sort of innocent. But in other times, it's going to be less innocent, maybe in ways that we really don't perceive, but also lead to outcomes that we don't want. We also have questions around intellectual property control that are just beginning to be explored. So these are the terms of service for Midjourney, which is one of the text-to-image models. I'm just highlighting some of the key pieces. So Midjourney will tell you, you own all of this, right? The output is yours. But as part of using our service, we get essentially a very free license to do whatever we want with it, both with the output as well as with the input, with the prompt that you write. So you may own the prompt, it may be yours, but they have the ability to use that for whatever purpose they like, essentially. So this is what goes in and what goes out. And then can you actually protect, in a broader sense, a broader legal sense, the output of these things? And initial signs are no. The US Copyright Office turned down copyright on some images that were generated by an AI model just recently. And I mean, I put these slides together like 3-4 weeks ago. More insane things have happened, like somebody uploaded a song to Spotify, spoofing Drake and The Weeknd. Palantir has started to train models to manage battlefield operations using AI agents, so AI entirely managing battlefield operations in wars. And these are just some of the headlines. So this is going to happen left and right. So we need RIT's leadership more than ever to be able to navigate these things, to be able to understand the ethical implications, the technical implications, the creative implications. And it has to start with our students. These are going to be the people who are experiencing this firsthand, and they're going to be closest to it. And so we'll need the leadership that we experience here and that we build here more than we've ever needed before. This is a little painting created by DALL-E 2, actually DALL-E 1. where all I put in was this little prompt. And so this is what the future of creativity looks like for me. All right. So thank you all. I'll hand it back over to Evan.
I don't know if I'm inspired or terrified. And that will be a jumping off point, certainly in the discussion we're all going to have up here on stage. Let me turn now to Christine Ramage. Christine is currently the VP of Photography for Paramount Plus. At Paramount Plus, she leads a team creating photography for many uses, including marketing, publicity, and social. She visits space on the Enterprise. She manages cowboys in Montana as a regular part of her job. Formerly, she was the VP of Photography for AMC Networks, hanging out with zombies, creating photography to support all their brands. Not the Zombies brands, maybe the Zombies brand. Before AMC, Christine enjoyed working at People magazine, met President Obama, traveled across the country, directed many photo shoots. The favorite parts of her job are working with photographers, discovering emerging talent, and solving creative problems. And her happy place is on set, collaborating with image makers and art directors and actors, creating awesome images. This is Christine Ramage.
Everybody. Thank you. All right. I'm just going to close this. Make room for my own laptop, because I need my notes. Can everybody hear me? So thank you for having me today. I'm very excited to be here. As Evan mentioned, I graduated from RIT in 1995 in the photojournalism program. And he explained that I'm the VP of Photography for Paramount Plus, working on everything. That anything that has the word photo in it, it's part of my purview at Paramount Plus. And since I graduated in 1995, my career has matched the arc of the technological revolution in photography. I've gone from printing in a darkroom to magazine photo editing to my current role. And in that time, we've gone from shooting film to using 100 megapixel cameras. I'm just going to scroll through some of the stuff I've worked on in the past few years at AMC. However, the basic technical knowledge that I've gained at RIT has continued to help me throughout my career. The tools I learned with might be different, but the fundamentals are the same, and good photography is good photography. And technology is a fantastic tool for the creative mind. The way I'm using photography has changed with the advancements of digital. When I first started at People magazine, it was about getting the perfect shot. And now, in the digital world, my photographers work faster and capture more images to build a robust campaign. In my role, I have to think about the big picture, not just the final image. So before each shoot, I spend a lot of time thinking about these questions. Who is the right photographer for the job? Who has the right technical skills? The right personality? What are the parameters of this shoot? How much time will we have with the actors? Where can we shoot? What sets does the show have that we can use? Are there talent sensitivities? Yes, there always are. Do we need to employ the stunt team? What other things do we need to capture that day beyond photography? These questions all ladder up to the big question, what can we capture that will allow us to create the best art and most compelling photography? Then we spend a lot of time building that space and a minute-by-minute schedule that allows us to have a successful shoot. So here's how I spend my days, bringing the creative to life. And at Paramount Plus, I'm in the wonderful position of partnering with the creative directors to actualize their creative concepts and sculpt 360 campaigns. It all starts with a sketch. I help figure out how to use photography and technology to make that sketch come to life. Here's a couple of examples from our show Tulsa King that's on our service. And things we had to think about, based on those questions I was talking about before, were constraints on the actor's time, fire, as you'll see. We can't have fire next to Sylvester Stallone in real time. Weather, proximity of locations, and the number of things we wanted to capture that day. So we need to shoot fast and creatively to make this happen. So here's the sketches, and then Frank Ockenfeld's shot for us on Seamless, matching the lighting to the plates that we shot the day before. And then here's the final comps and how it worked. And in this case, it's fairly simple because we're prioritizing Stallone as our main draw for this show. I also want to show you what we call our master canvas. This is a good example of technology, art, and design being used together. This image doesn't work as a standalone image. It kind of fails that way, actually. But because our platform is a streaming service and the content ends up in a variety of broadcast formats from mobile to large screen TVs, and then our advertising placements, which have endless shapes and sizes, we need to be able to crop and resize this image in 100 million ways. And that way we have this canvas that allows the designers to do that. And therefore the amount of imagery we need to do that is very extensive. At this shoot, there were also two other key art ideas, motion concepts that match the key art, character portraits, which you'll see here, which were used for character portraits on social, but also as part of publicity, and then multi-purpose gallery photography, which we use for everything from our platform to this cool little thing that the social team put together for little character gifts. Okay, and then here's just some quick stats of the amount of stuff that we did in one day, which is we had 9 actors, 14 different set locations, 18 lighting scenarios, a full plate day, and we shot over 10,000 images in one day, which is a lot. And that's kind of a small one, honestly. So then here's another example for our show 1923, which is starring Harrison Ford and Helen Mirren. And in this scenario, our considerations were an incredibly difficult location, basically the middle of nowhere in Montana, the amount of content we needed to capture, constraints on the talent time, transportation, feasibility of moving, and weather. But we're in Montana, and we wanted to shoot the actors on location so we could have beautiful, epic images. So here's James Minchin working his magic, but we also needed to shoot them on seamless. So then our production team erected a giant tent in the middle of a field so we could shoot seamless and some motion concepts in there. And then we needed 3 photographers to shoot and 2 motion teams in order to make it all happen in one day. And what I'm showing you that's the final stuff. And then this is just a very small sliver of what was created in the end. We have historic overtones that were shot by one of the women on my team. We have the gallery photography, and we have James Minchin's environmentals. If I put everything in there, it would be way too much. My presentation would go on forever. And then this is another example of the amount of stuff we did. So we had 3 photographers, 2 motion setups, 10 actors, 27 different lighting scenarios, 20 different locations, and over 12,000 images shot. And then lastly, for our series Rabbit Hole, the creative team came up with these marketing concepts that used bold color and cool typography. And I needed to produce photography to stand up to that. Considerations here, again, were constraints on talent time, stunts, available sets, and space. And clearly, we can't ask Kiefer Sutherland to fall through the air on his own. So we can have our stunt double do that. And every time he did that, I felt it. It was really scary to watch. But it was a great way to do that because then we shot Kiefer on seamless and put his head in afterwards, which is awesome. And then here's our final result, which, looks pretty realistic, but it's the stunt double's body. And here's another example of that. And then just to give you an idea, my friends on the motion team put together this awesome slide, or awesome little reel, to show what we did from this rabbit hole, the rabbit hole campaign.
I just got a bad feeling. the difference between what's real and what's not.
That was really fun to work on. And then with that one, we also did 3D scans, which is how we got a lot of that falling through the air work. And we obviously employed stunts, 6 actors, 10 lighting scenarios, and 5,000 images. So thank you very much.
There you go. All right, thank you, Christine. Really great stuff. Let me bring up next Josh Klenert. For 20 years, Josh has helped build or rebuild products and brands by inspiring teams, clients, and customers to ask why, what if, what's next. As an award-winning creative director and media executive, he's got a passion for connecting talented, multidisciplinary teams, embedding customer-centric design into company DNA, and combining product, brand, and content innovation to build killer experiences. He's led both in-house and studio efforts for the Huffington Post, AOL, iHeartRadio, Billboard, the Sundance Film Festival. At JPMorgan Chase, he helped build a next-gen digital banking experience before serving as Chief Creative Officer for the Chase brand. And most recently, he's led design across product, brand, and employee experience as Chief Design Officer at Bakkt, as they build a platform that connects commerce from crypto trading and payments to loyalty redemption. Josh, thanks for making the trip to Rochester. Thanks, man.
There. So I'll try to keep my looking back short so that we can get to talking about the future. But I did want to give one asterisk before I started, and that is that 100% of this work was created by humans. There was no AI involved whatsoever. So looking back, I really had to put myself in my shoes for being here in Rochester as a student. And back in the day, I was obsessed with magazine design. And I would get issues at the newsstand. Do you remember bookstores? They used to sell magazines. This was sort of my Pinterest board, if you will. And I would obsess over these magazine details on a weekly basis to understand how they made this, what they did. I didn't really know what art direction was for magazines, but I loved what they were doing on a weekly basis. And at RIT, I discovered a thing called The Reporter, where I was able to art direct the magazine for a couple years. So this was definitely looking back and really needed to go into the archives to find this. But, and I don't know if you guys still do this, but there was something called the Distorter. Is that still a thing? We did our parody issues back in the day, and I had a lot of fun doing those. But anyway, with this passion for editorial design, I packed up my RIT ID, went to New York, and was ready to work in magazines. And they say it's all about the journey and not necessarily about the destination, and it's so true. Never in a million years did I think I would be interviewing 50 Cent for Billboard, building out a $15 million theater for iHeartRadio, or ultimately ringing the bell with the New York Stock Exchange. So while you did learn your core here, you have to be flexible in order to move forward for sure. And really the first part of my career was all about being useful, and that was sort of the first chapter of my run, where I worked for a design studio called Don Morris Design, and there in New York we worked with almost every editorial brand of the day. And we got to redesign and relaunch and reimagine a number of editorial publications, which was a fantastic exposure for me at a very young age at a small studio to have my hands in all these projects. And I couldn't have had this experience had I gone to a bigger studio. And it was at this studio that we segued into brand design, and then ultimately doing things like the Sundance Film Festival, where we created all of the visual identity across the board for that festival, which was an incredibly exhausting project because, like Christine was saying, for 6 months we are just obsessed with this entire event. And it was during this work for the Sundance Film Festival that we got a call from a guy named Bob Redford, who ran the festival. And after doing all the graphics for 3 years, he let us know that it was time for change and they were going to move on, which was, I think, the breath of fresh air that we needed after working in an exhausted way for 3 years. But he told us change was the only constant. And this quote sat with me and it's been a part of my career ever since, and really has been chapter number 2 for me. As I've gone in to lead design teams inside brands and help lead some sort of transformation. Whether it's going from print to digital or expanding on the digital footprint, it's really been about going in and helping some sort of change and transformation. So whether it was at Billboard, which was a 114-year-old trade publication, we really went in and tried to make it relevant for consumers, for businesses, not just being about the old charts, but being relevant, including launching things like clubs in Tokyo. I mean, that was not a part of my lessons here at RIT for sure. And then creating a new digital platform for Clear Channel at the time called iHeartRadio. Ultimately, iHeartMedia, it was rebranded for Clear Channel, and so we saw the whole transformation take over the entire company, which was fascinating. But who here has ever had a BlackBerry? Okay, does anyone here know what a BlackBerry is? Yes, okay. This was the early days of the iPhone. So we were learning digital as was everyone else at the time. So we dove in, we launched on iPhone and Android and BlackBerry, and then ultimately iPad, website, et cetera, et cetera. And it was a fascinating time to help drive change and digital inside a company that was largely based in terrestrial radio. Evan, you might know a little bit about that, but we'll talk about that later. And then ultimately going on to HuffPost, where again, at a time when Huffington Post was largely based on a desktop website, and we helped lead the charge, expanding onto mobile, tablet, doing a redesign of the news app, but also launching a 24-hour streaming video network, and then also launching a long-form journalism platform called Huffington, which was the first of its kind iPad magazine app. And then moving over to Chase, where we had a very tactical app at the time, very, sort of transactional for what you needed to do in the mobile banking space, but we really brought some humanity to it, redesigning it, making it more simple, more personal, and more human. And as a part of that, we really needed to build out a diverse team to reflect the diversity across America and for our users. So, working with a large team of designers, researchers, writers, photo editors, and video editors to really make an experience that all users could use. And then at ServiceNow, which is a platform that empowers different workflows, it's a very B2B experience. And again, for me, going from a consumer experience to a B2B experience helped me change and helped me evolve over time so I could learn new skills. And it was here that it was very much like my old studio days, where we were able to go in and help many different companies transform within their platforms using our software. And then lastly, at Bakkt, which is in a completely different space, slightly financial, but sort of leveraging things like loyalty and crypto together. So whether you earn points at Starbucks and then you can pay using crypto, these are tools that we build that allow for consumer companies to leverage crypto in a safe environment. And as a part of that, we rebranded to sort of share how we connect with the businesses, and I'll play that real quick and let us get on to the next thing. So, Thank you. So I'll maybe just end with, it's been an incredible run working with some really amazing people, learning new skills along the way, and being open to change, which I'll leave you with one last quote about change, which I've always loved. If you don't like change, you're going to like irrelevance even less. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Josh. Our final presenter today is Dmitri Becker. Dmitri is an embedded systems engineer for the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory, where he was the onboard image processing lead for NASA's Double Asteroid Redirection Test, or DART mission. Dmitri has worked with the Applied Physics Laboratory since 2016 and previously worked at the Naval Research Laboratory, NASA Jet Propulsion Laboratory, and Draper Laboratory, all with a focus on embedded hardware and software design for space applications. At APL, Dmitri has served in a number of leadership roles, including Chief Technologist of the Space Systems Implementation Branch and Supervisor of the Processing Architectures and Algorithms section. Becker also received the 2023 Kate Gleason College of Engineering Computer Engineering Academy Award. An amazing resume. Let's hear from Dmitri.
Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. So I would like to begin with talking about my transition from RIT to where I am today. So as mentioned, I work at the Applied Physics Laboratory. I'm an embedded systems engineer, and my focus is on doing onboard processing for spacecraft and for instruments, basically handling the data. But it all started here at RIT as a student in 2002 to 2007, where I got my MS/BS degrees. The classes here were wonderful, the professors are great, the labs and facilities were amazing, even back then, even better now. And have you heard about the co-op program here? So if there's one thing that I really want to underscore is the opportunity to do internships and co-ops here at RIT. That really has helped me fine-tune where it is that I wanted to go in my career. I started with a curiosity in space development, and I had a couple internships in laboratories, but really towards the end of my internships, I knew that I wanted to work in this industry. And one thing I tell students is try different things when you do your internships. Don't actually go back to the same one, even if you like it, because it's much harder to do that later on. It's time when you're a student is important to do those trial and error things while you're a student. So after RIT, I went on to a couple different places. I spent a lot of time at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory. I did a lot of internal R&D there, worked on instruments that look at how we analyze geologic features for hopefully future implementation on Mars rovers, things, bringing in early days of AI and machine learning on board, airborne instruments, little small satellites called CubeSats. And then from there, I transitioned over, we moved over to the East Coast. I worked for the Naval Research Laboratory on the government side of things there, where the focus was on satellite servicing and how do we kind of bring new life into older satellites on orbit, because when they're aging, we don't really do anything with them and they're very expensive. And then finally, from 2016 to now, I've been working at the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Lab, and the focus there for me has been more on the flight projects, also continuing internal R&D work and stepping into some of the R&D management work, running some of our IRIT portfolios. But today, I'd like to talk to you about the DART mission, the Double Asteroid Redirection Test mission. And for this project, this NASA project, we deliberately took a spacecraft and crashed it into an asteroid. You may have seen something about this last year in September. And the purpose was to check how we can do asteroid planetary defense technology, right? So if an asteroid were ever to come on a collision course with Earth, we'd have the knowledge and the experience of doing it again in the future. This was just a test, I want to underscore. There was no threat to the asteroid. Oh, there was a threat to the asteroid. there was no threat from the asteroid to Earth, either before the test or after the test. And I'll talk a little bit about why we did and how we did it. So, little promo video.
We're embarking on a new era of humankind.
Didymos and Dimorphos make a great target. We needed an asteroid with a moon that you can see from ground-based telescopes around the world.
We're doing this mission to prove that we can deflect an asteroid.
5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And liftoff of the Falcon 9 and DART on NASA's first planetary defense test to intentionally crash into an asteroid.
Even if we do everything right, our sensors work well, our spacecraft is doing well, even then, we might still miss. 4, 3, 2, 1.
For the first time ever, humanity has changed the orbit of a planetary object.
NASA confirms that DART successfully changed the targeted asteroid's trajectory.
Using the ground-based telescopes around the world to watch the systems and see how it's affected by this impact event.
This is a watershed moment for planetary defense and a watershed moment for humanity.
That was an exciting 6 years, 6 or 7 years. That project took some time to develop, and my role on that, there we go. So as was mentioned earlier, I was the onboard image processing lead for the project. We had an instrument on board called Draco. It's a camera, and from that camera we get the images of the asteroids, and there's all sorts of processing that has to happen directly on the spacecraft to figure out where the asteroid is, what the coordinates are, how big, how bright, and things like that. So I had a small team, and we were working on that portion of the mission. That's a photo from the time of impact, 7:15 on September 26th last year. And these are some of the first images that we got back. The mission was streaming data back as it was flying into the asteroid. There's no point storing any data on board because the spacecraft gets destroyed. But there's a little bit of delay, obviously, in doing that. And immediately after you saw everyone kind of cheer and jump up, our job there was to hang tight for the next few minutes, get all the data together, stitch it all together, and make it available for NASA and the public and the broadcast. So this is just the photos with some of our scientists looking at the very first few images. It's very exciting seeing those boulders and lines and the shape of the asteroid for the first time. All right, so a little bit about the test and what we did and why we did it. So this is a binary asteroid system. It's actually 2 asteroids, Didymos, the larger one, Dimorphos, the smaller one. Dimorphos orbits Didymos, and the reason we picked this asteroid system is because it's very easy to observe from Earth. When the smaller asteroid passes in front of the bigger one, you can kind of see a little blip in the signal, in the light. So it was envisioned that, hey, we know the orbit before we get there. If we hit the smaller asteroid, that blip will change a little bit, and we're going to try to measure how much. And that'll tell us, how successful this sort of technology is. The interesting thing is, when you fly into an asteroid going at 14,000 miles per hour, things come off of it. And what the mission really wanted to understand, the more things that come off of the asteroid, the more of a push it actually gets, to deflect it. It's not just like billiard balls where you just hit them and they kind of go places and stay intact. Things get destroyed, ejecta gets released, and that gives it a quite a nice momentum boost. So we were aiming for at least tens of seconds change in the orbit period, and we actually changed the orbit of the smaller asteroid by a good half hour or so. So here's how that works kind of pictorially. So if there was no ejecta coming out of the asteroid, get a little push, but the more ejecta that comes off from the impact area, you get kind of a much bigger push, momentum enhancement factor. That's what it's called. And so it falls kind of in this, more than some, but less than lots area, but definitely more than no ejecta. And that's the number that we were aiming to get, 3.6. So obviously, there's a lot more data analysis that goes into this, not just the number. But it's good to know. This is the type of data that we need to know for the future. If there were ever an asteroid coming to Earth, we'd want to know, how early do we have to hit it? How big of a spacecraft do we need? How fast? When should we hit it? And we would like to know ahead of time the composition, if we can, so we know about this momentum enhancement factor as well. In general, asteroids, why are they important? Obviously, you don't want to be on that right side of the screen. Dinosaurs weren't too lucky. But we actually have technology now to observe these things. We know, the big asteroids that are not a threat to Earth and that we've studied, they're fully identified. It's the region here that we're interested in, the 140 meters plus. The asteroid we hit was 160 meters in diameter, and such an object hitting Earth would still cause regional level devastation, like a city or a county. So we really want to beef up our technology and defenses to handle those sorts of objects. We know about 42% of them, so there's more work to be done. You have to detect them before you know to hit them. And there's also other technologies too. Maybe deflection is not always the best approach. If you discover them very late, there's other options as well at the table. Switching gears a little bit, I want to talk about the technology and the mission itself. That's the spacecraft. The core of the spacecraft is about the size of a large vending machine. And then we have these beautiful long rollout solar arrays. They're about 30 feet on each side. It's the first time that a spacecraft was built with rollout solar arrays. They kind of just unfold like a rug. And we can get a lot of power generated from that. My part of the project, as was mentioned, is the image processing on board. So this is what we actually see before impact. For most of the mission, for most of almost 9 months or so that we were cruising towards the asteroid, it's done with manual commanding, or we upload parameters for navigation, but 4 hours before impact, everything is sort of hands-off. The spacecraft at that point has to go at its target and do everything autonomously. The reason is there's no way to interact or change anything, really. The delay in the signal between the spacecraft and Earth is in the 30 seconds range in one way. So 4 hours is just a single pixel. 73 minutes before we start seeing two objects, and really 2.5 minutes before impact, that's when you can really start telling that the features, boulders and things like that. So all of this being done autonomously with the ground just observing. This interesting video here, this is the view that the computer had. So obviously, the imagery is real. Everything annotated here, all the numbers, the color highlights, that's all coming down from the spacecraft as various annotations that the computer is computing, and we throw it up on the screen to give us sort of situational awareness of what's going on. We had this for the duration of the mission. Obviously, this close to impact, we're not really doing anything to change it, but let's watch that. So 10 times, playing back 10 times of real-time speed. During the mission, it was one image per second. This is stitched together to show a little faster. And the computer here is identifying the two different objects and locking into the smaller one. And then 2.5 minutes before impact, we turn off our targeting system and just let the spacecraft coast towards impact. That's more of a safety thing. We didn't want things to go wrong in the last 2.5 minutes because we'd have absolutely no way of interacting or changing anything on board. And then boom, impact, and that is the last image that came back. Obviously, the spacecraft was in the middle of sending it out, and right around 20% it got through it and destroyed. So I was thinking about some of the inspiration for developing these displays. So on the right side there, those are our real mission displays that we used at the Mission Control Center. Developing them, I thought about some of the movies I've seen, Asteroid Hunter, Deep Impact. You always see kind of like the big body on the screen with the little flashy lights and little error bars or scale bars on the side. We had most of those things, and they actually had a purpose. And it was just a ton of fun designing this and seeing it work in real time. What's next? So we did the impact in 2022. We demonstrated that we can actually nudge an object in the solar system for planetary defense. In 2026, the Europeans will have a spacecraft that will visit the same asteroid, and they'll be able to get some nice high-resolution imagery and have other sensors that can study the crater that we made. And that'll give us even more data about the makeup of the asteroid, and all that data goes into the portfolio of how to design future planetary defense missions. So that's it.
All right, a lot to talk about. Let's bring all four panelists, if we could, take your seats. I'll have questions, and we want to certainly leave time if the audience has questions as well. I hope everyone, yep, I think everyone can hear our mics pretty well. Dimitri, since it's top of mind for me, I'll start with you just briefly here. Remind us, so we saw the dinosaur-sized one, and then the small near-Earth objects on the far left. The DART mission deflected an asteroid that was in, where on the scale?
About the middle.
Right in the
so
middle.
160 meters in diameter.
Do you sense that this mission undeniably successful, but how quickly could it be scrambled into actual action in the event that we get some sort of actual concerning incoming in the future?
So obviously the first step is having the capability to detect these things, right?
Yeah.
I mean, if you find one tomorrow, there's less things that we can do. This project took 6 years to develop and envision and build. If you had to do it again, it would be a little faster, but the key to all of this, regardless of any sort of asteroid deflection technology, is early identification. Usually, we can find these things early on, and the earlier we can find them, the better we can do.
Forgive my ignorance, but if you can change 33 minutes, I think is what we saw, more than you even probably at baseline would have called successful, would we then pepper such an object with multiples to keep deflecting it?
No, that depends. You have to really hit it early. The earlier you find it and the earlier you hit it, you have to give it a smaller nudge the earlier that you find it, right? So multiple impacts, probably not, but it all depends on the scenario.
Well, I certainly appreciate, on behalf of humanity, thanks for doing that.
And this stuff.
I know, I hope everyone in this audience understands the breadth of it. Yeah, the breadth of it. So just working across the panel, Christine, I thought the presentation was absolutely remarkable. What you're doing in a single day amazes me. But you do have human beings you're working with. Are most of the celebrities pretty cool to work with?
Actually, yes. We're on the same team. So we're all doing the same thing. We're promoting the show that they're in, and the more successful the show is, the better everybody does. So, yeah.
I find one of the great pieces of advice I had that kind of jives with, I think it was Josh concluded with the if you don't want to change, you're going to like irrelevance even less. I was talking, this was back in my wine writing days, I was in California talking to a 55-year-old lawyer who also got into winemaking, and he was talking about all the new apps and expectation of being on different platforms. And he went on this 5-minute rant about how annoying it was. And then he stopped and said, I'm just kidding. What do I want to be, a dinosaur? He said, I better learn, otherwise I won't be relevant anymore. So as your career has progressed, there's probably been a great deal of change since your RIT days. How do you find yourself working to stay on top of change?
I mean, that's a great question. I mean, we're constantly changing and researching, and I mean, just file management in itself, like I had to relearn all of that from when we did film, and it was categorizing all of that, to now just keeping track of 12,000 files from one day and getting approvals from the talent on all of that. I mean, I'm constantly just researching and trying to figure out what the next thing is for us.
It's overwhelming for all of us in the lay public, so yeah. Josh, you're telling me that Bitcoin hasn't died.
I'm still bullish.
You still bullish?
Yeah.
I thought I read that.
So do you get the sense, one of the very sort of, I have like unearned confidence in this opinion, and disabuse me of this. I have thought that crypto isn't really going to be anything more than an investment in a portfolio unless it becomes usable, unless it becomes adoptable in a way that you actually can buy a Starbucks coffee or otherwise. But I still don't see that much, but maybe I'm not looking hard enough?
We're in the early days still. I mean, I am not the crypto expert by any means, but there is definitely a utility that can be served over time. It's very much the early days right now. And things like the Lightning Network, which allows for quick transactions to happen. So you could start to do peer-to-peer payments and do payments in store with a quick tap will help accelerate that, but it's going to take time, and we're trying to build a platform that will be there for the future, and we just need to get there with some patience. It's early days for sure.
Luiz, when you talk about personalization, you focused a lot on AI. And I think one of the things that is making people who are working in similar fields nervous is that for the user, personalization will mean a lot of different things. Derek Thompson has a piece in The Atlantic today about the amazing ways he could waste time with AI already. But for the workers, does that mean an experience that, I guess I want to be optimistic. You posted, I don't know if it was from Reddit or whatever forum it was, where someone is expressing real consternation that the work that they thought that they were inspired to do might be gone pretty quickly. But I think you and all of your colleagues have made the point that you have to be adaptable. So how do you balance the adaptability versus understanding that you may have to change and it may not be exactly where your heart is right now?
Yeah, we sort of have to accept the reality for what it is, right? AI is here. It's being used. If you're not using it, somebody else is. And I think we have now an opportunity to, each of us, to be able to try it very easily, right? Fire up a browser tab and you can use it for free. You can pay a little bit more and have access to advanced features. And to try to experiment on your own. It's so easy to experiment. Right? Try to get it to write you an email. Try to get it to write a Christmas carol in the style of Lil Wayne. Whatever works for you. But think about how the work that you do on your day-to-day could be changed by that. And you can try these things out. Don't put your company's data in there. Very bad. But I think in the future, we're going to see partnerships between people and AI much more often. It'll be built into our tools. It'll be built into our workflows. It'll look less like ChatGPT and more like an assistant in Word and assistant in PowerPoint or whatever. But we need to adapt to it, right? Otherwise, somebody else will.
RIT told us on the talk show this week, I mean, they're leaning into AI, you have to, that this is going to be an institution that not only tries to stay right where AI is going, but tries to do so in ethical ways. I am curious to know if all of you see AI as likely to enhance your career or remove opportunities for your own employment. I'll start with you, Luiz.
I think I'm in the pro camp, apprehensively pro, because there are a lot of nasty things that can happen as well, and ethically dubious things.
For example?
Well, I mean, we were talking just before I started, right? Companies like Palantir are starting to build AI agents that can support battlefield operations. So you've got an AI that can send out a drone, get battlefield recon, and then help somebody on the ground make decisions about what to do, help them understand their enemy and so on. That's if it's on your side. Imagine if somebody else does the same. And I don't understand enough about the conventions of war today to know that we've thought those things through. But in my more like narrow personalization world, I have an opportunity to maybe simulate what a customer interaction looks like, simulate what a system or how a system might work before we actually spend any engineering time to build it. Have ChatGPT give me all of the counterpoints to something that I think is a good idea, without having to schedule a single meeting. You know, everybody loves meetings. So I see it as a good thing.
Okay, Josh?
I mean, I see it as an accelerator to the creative process. I don't think it's going to be the final output, if not the final logo, the final photo, final social media messaging, but it's a tool to help accelerate the creative process. So I think it's a good thing in work. I would probably advise you not to use it in your personal life or watch out. When I sent my girlfriend a Valentine's Day letter, written by ChatGPT, it didn't go over too well.
Christine, I was thinking during your presentation about all the decisions you're making, even on set days.
Yeah.
And I don't know that AI could do everything that you're doing.
Not on set days, but those sketches could be replaced by AI. And we had a shoot that we did this month where they literally typed in, we have a show coming up called Bass Reeves, David Aiuelio as Bass Reeves with a cowboy hat, and they got close to what we wanted to shoot. And is it a great example of, okay, well, we want him on the horse and we want the horse to be rearing, and what does that look like? What's the angle that we can do? So all of that thinking that maybe we would have done in the days before, they could do in the weeks before with with AI. So we used it for that purpose. But in my world right now, like we have to fully own all the imagery, and AI doesn't allow you to do that. Like our lawyers at work would never stand for that.
Dimitri?
Yeah, so in my work, it's a tremendous opportunity. Building spacecraft and instruments on board spacecraft, the process and the data is very well controlled right now. It's very hard to have any AI, if any, on board. Scientists usually want the raw data, and they want a pre-scripted observation campaign when we get to places. So that's, very tight right there. But AI does offer, and machine learning does offer the opportunity to be able, for an instrument, for a spacecraft, to do more observations uncommanded, and then report back what it sees and what it interprets, right? That is a little tricky. The balance there is convincing our scientists that you can either get what you're prescribed, and you know exactly how it works, or you can get what you're prescribed, and maybe you can get a little more if you let the machine on board do some more discovery. And maybe most of that stuff is irrelevant and you throw it out, but once in a while you can find something interesting, and maybe that's worth bringing down. The thing with spacecraft is there's a very limited amount of data that we can get. The antenna has to be pointed the right way, the bandwidth is low, this isn't like DirecTV. Even that mission right there, we have a fairly high data rate, 3 megabits per second, but that's not streaming, right? And only when we're pointing in the right direction. So if we had, not for this mission, but in general, a little more AI on board, we can look at more things at more times, but it also comes with the responsibility of understanding, like we can't have AI do a scientific discovery for us, right? Nobody would like that.
Well, I think about how we're communicating with current students, and on the program this week, some RIT students I thought were outstanding. And I asked them something that I'd like to ask this panel, which is, so my son is 11 years old, and I feel in the last 6 months, I've really lost a handle on how to help him see, if he were to come to me and say, what are the fields that are likely to be really consistently employable? What's the right direction to feel like I've got a really solid foundation for a future? So one of the things the RIT students said that I absolutely agree with is we still need critical thinking. There are certain skills that we all have to have well into the future. But when it comes to actual work fields, if you're advising students, this is solid. This AI will not take this job from you, or this is a really burgeoning field. Dimitri, where do you go?
I mean, so in engineering, like I'm always an advocate for that, right? STEM fields, very safe choice, lots of job opportunities. It's easy to move between careers and fields. As a computer engineering major, I can do computer engineering, electrical engineering, computer science. So and RIT is a great place for that. I'm seeing a lot of positive change here too with the merger of the technical fields and also the arts and creativity here. I think that's important. You're attracting new talent, new diverse talent, and I think that's good for everyone.
What do you think?
You're going to ask me that question. That's a hard question. From the arts point of view, I think it's difficult. I wouldn't, for my son who's 14, I would still encourage him to get into some sort of arts, but I wouldn't maybe have him focus on one thing, right? It's not just about photography, but it's about photography and / video. It's about thinking about content capture and, like you're saying, critical thinking within that field. You can't just focus on one thing, I think, anymore.
Yeah, I mean, it's certainly about the journey, not the destination. So being able to have a skill that, certainly in the creative field like we do, does translate to other fields so you can adapt over time. I think if you're in a field where there is a lot of repetitive tasks, that's prime for getting replaced by or, transition to AI or some sort of machine learning. We at BAC, we run a call center where people can call up for travel or issues with points and rewards, and there's a lot of tasks there that can be automated through AI, whether it's answering questions or being able to get people information quickly. Whereas with the creative field, I mean, back 20 years ago, we were using Photoshop with our hands. Now we can type. You still need to come up with the thing that you're going to type. 100%. There's creativity to the prompts, like you saw in your presentation. Yep. So, you just need to adapt to the tools over time.
Sure. I think fields that deal in abstractions will benefit the most and potentially be the safest. So things like product management or creative fields, I think you're in relatively good places. Engineering as well. I mean, you'd be surprised how much of that is still just thinking about solving the problem, right, rather than writing the code. Sometimes writing the code is not the most pleasant part anyway. So you'll be happy to have AI do that for you.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think I'm ambivalent, but I mean, I see a lot of reason for optimism. I will say, Dimitri, you've probably seen Don't Look Up, which is a metaphor for climate change, of course. But someone in tech recently said, we're going to be so adept at using AI that we will be able to deflect asteroids, except for we're building an asteroid that's called AI that's going to come and hit us, and we're actually just assisting in our own destruction. Doesn't sound like you're in that doom camp.
No, I mean, well, look, anybody could do bad things with any new technology, right? So it's a balance, right? I think there's a lot of positive that we can do with it. Like I mentioned in my world, there's a lot of positive opportunity to have AI on board spacecraft and actually help us find more scientifically relevant things. But yeah, you're right. I mean, you can also use it as a bad actor as well. But I think the world's moving more towards sort of like this blending of what you observe in reality and augmentation with data that might be AI and machine learning driven. So, maybe in the future I'm looking at this room and there's a sensor in my head or my glasses that tells me exactly how many people are sitting here because it counted everyone. So things like that. And we'll have to kind of think about how do we, do we want all that data coming to us at all times?
Yeah, right.
Or is there some sort of filters we want to apply? Certainly, having that as an option, I think, would be interesting for certain applications, but you also, have to be able to discern, what you want to pay attention to and what you don't want to pay attention to. And sometimes maybe those things you're not paying attention to that are AI generated could be a little dangerous.
I mean, 20 years ago,
Yeah, go
like
ahead,
when we were using Photoshop, it was a little bit controversial for retouching magazine covers. Now Photoshop is being name dropped in, rap songs. At the same time, we're going into an election cycle that, we live in a world of deep fakes. And a lot of things that can be used by bad actors. So it all depends on how you use it.
I just have a couple more questions, and I definitely want to turn it over to the audience as much as we can. I was really moved by Josh's career path and the way that you talked about having no way of predicting all the different stops you would take and where you are now with BACT, but also looking at every different iteration of this career. And so I find that inspiring. We're in a town that for a long time, for decades, 60,000 plus people worked at one company and thought that they would get a job and do that for 30 to 40 years and then retire. And we're entering an era in which that kind of thinking, to Luis's point about sort of repetitive tasks, may not yield the same sort of career output. So as inspiring as that is, can I ask all of you briefly just to try to look ahead? I mean, if you look 5, 10, for the next 20 years, Luis, I mean, where do you expect to be and what do you see your field doing?
Oh, man. Barely know what I'm going to do tomorrow.
Sunday.
I mean, first of all, these things are super hard to predict, right? If you look back 15 years, you had, I think, that was around the first iPhone. 15 years ago. That's yesterday, man. Like, and today everybody has the 14th, 15th version of it, right? And it's a mainstay of our lives. Looking forward, I think a lot of our work is going to be with machines and with AI agents in one way or another, whether it's obvious or not. And we've got to build that muscle. We don't have it today. Very few of us do. I know I don't. Right? I'll be very clear about that. But we have to figure out what can we defer to machines, and what really do we have to work through with people. Organizational decisions, business strategy decisions, all of these things. So I expect the focus will be more on those things versus more of the tactical things.
From my iHeartRadio days, it comes to mind that, in the early days of the iPhone, we launched and created iHeartRadio. And we recognized that, 75, 85 years ago, people would gather around a giant box in their living room and listen to this awful crackly sound come out of it, and they loved it. Fast forward 75 years, and if you listen on your phone and it drops for 2 seconds, you hate it. So fast forward another couple years, I think there's just a sense of immediacy and tactileness that's going to be a part of what we do. And ultimately, it's going to be a blend of working together in person, working remotely. I think if you're a nimble company, you'll be able to do some work remote, so that's going to help really expand who can be a part of the field. Leads to diversity, it leads to different voices being a part of the conversation, not just ones that are based in San Francisco and New York and LA, but at the same time, I think getting together and collaborating in person is always really important.
I would say I love photography. I love the field that I'm in, and I think part of what's been so exciting as these 20 years have gone on since graduation is constantly changing, figuring out how better, smarter, cheaper ways to do stuff. Part of the reason we spend so much time and we shoot so much in one day is because it's less expensive when we do that. And I love the idea of the challenges of continuing in a creative field, but in a way that's more nimble, more streamlined, more that we can feed that insatiable beast of content that we need to for social handles and every other iteration that we need to have. I hope to be able to ride that wave as long as I can by staying ahead of keeping the costs down and getting more for less, all of those things.
Yeah, so in my field, you asked 5, 10, 15 years in the future. So in my field, so space has both like a blessing and a curse when it comes to ingesting new technology developed elsewhere, right? We're not going to take ChatGPT and put it on the spacecraft tomorrow, right? Everything has to be vetted. There's a fairly high bar for risk, and these missions cost a lot of money, and they're taxpayer dollars. They take many years to develop, so everything is very careful, sometimes to the point where we're using technology that's much older. So we do have sort of an opportunity to kind of see, what's happening. Some things maybe work, some things fail, and then hopefully, bring that up and, cherry pick what sort of things to include. Next 5 years, we'll have human presence on the moon landing, our Artemis program, look it up. 15 years, we'll have Mars sample return coming back to Earth, exploration of distant worlds, Saturn and the moon Titan as well. And hopefully, within the 50 years, maybe we'll have human presence going back and forth from Mars. So I'm optimistic.
My last question is, what percentage chance do you think it is that we're living in a simulation? Dmitri.
Look, I love The Matrix, it's one of my favorite films, but we're not living in a simulation.
No,
no, I don't think so.
Okay.
Why? Like, why?
do you know I asked this question with 3 RIT students, and the answers they gave me were 45%, 25%, and 10%.
I've heard the podcast.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe a little older, maybe. So, my video game playing days ended a little bit after I graduated at RIT, but I write code too, right? If this was a simulation, a lot of things could be going wrong.
A lot of things are going wrong.
What do you think?
0%.
0%.
0%.
All right, Josh?
I refuse to go there.
Okay.
100%, we're in a video game.
No?
So why am I
No,
deflecting
no,
asteroids?
no,
Yeah, right.
Louis.
I don't know. We're in real life.
Oh,
Okay.
I don't know. 0 to 10? Let's say 10.
10%.
I don't know. I just don't have a good foundation for it.
There we go. I think there's a microphone, or we do. So I want to make sure that anyone in the audience gets questions in if you want. So can we get a hands up for if you've got anything you want to ask? Here we go, right down here. And we'll go up to the back.
I think each one of you mentioned critical thinking, which is a buzzword you probably didn't use a lot 20 years ago. On the art and design side, you're influencing thinking using your art. On the engineering side, you're using critical thinking to avoid the missteps. And on the, I'll say the personalization side, we're looking to get people closer to their comfort levels. So that's the opening. If you look at sort of the social justice side and the echo chamber that we cause people to be more comfortable when they don't have to critically think, I'm asking you to think about the future where the technology will be really useful to enhance the echo chamber to make not the RIT grads, but all those other people less critically thinking? Is there a conversation worth having there?
Luiz, I'm going to make you start there.
Yeah, I think there's a real danger coming from like a general, let's call it like general personalization lens, right? Not specific to any particular platform, but these platforms are trying to detect what you're into, what you like, what you engage with specifically. Not necessarily what you like, but you engage with. And so they will, over time, learn to feed you those things that you'll click on, that you'll respond to, that you'll comment on. So there's a real danger there. I don't know what the right solution is, but at least we know there's a problem, and that's a good place to start.
Pet videos really are something.
Well, yeah. Or, if you lean a particular political preference, or if you're on TikTok, you've probably figured out that TikTok figures out what you like pretty quickly. And you end up, whether you like it or not, you end up in an echo chamber, right? This is just how things are set up. So we have to find ways to like check ourselves if we're aware of it, and I think societally, ways to check others. I don't know what the right tools are, but we know there's an issue.
But I think it definitely is what you're saying. You have to be aware of the fact that you are being, led in this direction, and it's something that we need to teach our kids. Like we try to avoid a lot of screen time with my children just because of those reasons, because then they start the TikTok rabbit hole or the YouTube Shorts thing, and next thing you know, I'm hearing about all of this stuff that he doesn't really need to be hearing about. Yeah, no, it's a being aware of it and controlling it, I think, to Luiz's point.
Josh?
Yeah, I'd say it's awareness, and we all have backgrounds where you learn about in our field creating images and all the things that go into that, so that when you do use some of the tools, I was using Midjourney recently to help a friend pre-visualize some images for her brand, which is largely teenage girls. So we used Midjourney to pre-viz like teenage girls playing soccer, very relevant here at RIT, and right off the bat, it just created all blonde girls. Mm-hmm. And if I asked that I wanted multiracial girls, or if I wanted African American girls, it took it out of a very suburban green background and made it very urban. I mean, that's really bad. Yeah. And you need to use our critical thinking tools to add the correct inputs to correct that stuff.
Dmitry?
Yeah, so I think you got to be careful and try not to lose the creativity. And even in the work that I do, we complete a mission, we write the code, it works, great. And then there's a desire to reuse it exactly like it is. Maybe even it doesn't fit, right? Because there's a lot of checks that already happened on it, right? A lot of verification. And that's great from an efficiency perspective, but sometimes you can't put a round peg into a square hole type of thing. So you have to think about that. Can I still have some creativity when I go from mission to mission? And I think that's important as well.
And let me also just address critical thinking. I talked to a colleague I think she's 32. She also teaches, and none of her students, no surprise, are getting news from cable. Nobody's got a cable subscription. Nobody has a newspaper subscription. So they're getting their news exclusively through social platforms, often through TikTok and YouTube. Now, often that means maybe the New York Times or other sources have created their own content that gets into these platforms. TikTok is not creating news, but they are a platform for hearing about the world. But she asked the students, how do you come to the conclusion that what you're seeing on TikTok, for news, YouTube, whatever, is true? And the most common answer was, if I see it a lot, if I see it often. And if you think about what the panelists just said, they're not seeing a landscape where, well, it's a free competition of ideas, and the best ideas rise above, and they'll see that more often. They're on platforms that try to figure out what they already have biases in, or what they already do, and then they just target that. So they're more likely to only see something that suits either what they've previously done, their biases, et cetera. So of course they're going to see that more, and then they're going to be more inclined to think that that is true. So if you are conservative, if you are progressive, if you've got this idea or that, we have to have a real campaign of media literacy and critical thinking teaching starting very young, or we're going to be in much more trouble than we even are in now. Oh, right, yeah, right here, and then we'll go to.
I've only had the opportunity to witness Imagine for a couple of years, but each time the Futurists Symposium engages in either the or one of the most important conversations that I get to experience each year. So again, thank you. This has been remarkable. I think Jeff's question went a little bit in the direction that I'd like to explore, and I'd like to offer, I think, for a future Futurist Symposium, engaging in the why, the how, and the sort of what's. And why are we doing this? And maybe that's not a fair question to ask at this late stage of this conversation here, but what about the rules, the governors that we should be thinking about placing on these, and who arbitrates those types of decisions? I think that AI has the potential, or not just AI, but these other areas, whether it's TikTok and mass media, but we've spent a bit of time on AI. CRISPR is another one that comes to mind. Who, how, and why should we be engaging in rules and regulations and governors on this? Thank you.
Can I start with Dimitri and just come across the room?
That's a tough question. I mean, because you also don't want to limit any sort of creativity. Anybody could go out there, write a program, put an AI, machine learning engine. Should there be some rules? Probably, when it borders on the borderline of being dangerous to something, or we certainly have rules for drones and UAVs. You used to be able to buy a UAV and fly it anywhere, and then they decided well, it's probably not safe to do it around airports, so there's rules against that. You have to get licenses and things like that. So I think there should be some, but you have to really balance it with not limiting creativity, freedom of speech, freedom of expression, things like that.
I mean, I think there needs to be rules and ethics applied to certain ways that we use things. There was just that story not that long ago about a woman complaining that she had been over-photoshopped for the cover of a magazine. That's still happening in 2023, and AI is a perfect example, as to your point about was all white girls or change the background. Like, we have to be our own, we have to, as a society, I think we have to have a certain amount of ethics and rules that we give ourselves. We can't expect anyone else to do that for us, but we need to come at it with, from a good point of view, not from a, what were you saying before, about the evil side, yeah.
Bad actors, yeah.
Bad actors, thank you, thank you. Yeah.
I mean, I think in the creative space, there are societies out there like Society of Publication Designers, Society of Illustrators, et cetera, that could help to put together some ethical guidelines, things like the photoshopping. That said, if government got involved in Illustrator and Photoshop, I don't think we'd ever be where we are today. So.
Yeah, I think we'll definitely need some sort of government regulation at some degree. I think from like a national security point of view, they're talking about things like export controls on chips, placing fingerprinting on chips, like on the silicone, so that you can trace what it's being used for and potentially shut it down remotely if the use cases aren't the sorts of things you'd like to be supporting as a nation state. So we'll need something from a national security point of view, but I think the exact mechanism is still an open question.
And let me also just respond to the notion of regulation. There was a lot of publication, a lot of talk about this, whether it was Elon Musk and other tech leaders calling for a 6-month pause in AI development. Eliezer Yudkowsky is probably the doomiest person in the AI world. He really believes we're all going to be turned into paperclips. And he likes to point to the cancerous mole experiment in which AI machine learning was given all kinds of thousands of images of non-cancerous moles and tumors and skin lesions and cancerous ones. But a lot of the cancerous ones had rulers next to them showing you the size of them because they were cancers. That's what doctors were measuring. And the AI program eventually decided that rulers have cancer, should probably be destroyed. Now, you can create a guardrail and figure out what to do with that, but Yudkowsky believes that we need way more guardrails than we have. I try not to read him very much. He's very doomy. But the notion of a pause also says, look at how fast it's being implemented. And think about, Christine's work. I'm blown away by your presentation. I'm just amazed by your presentation. I also know that AI programs are going to consume what you've already created. And so when Josh throws in a prompt or I throw in a prompt, they're going to take this universe of already created material and they're going to create something new, but they're sort of using your stuff. And I'm not really sure why that isn't a copyright infringement. But didn't U.S. copyright say it isn't?
No, they did. They said it was.
If it's that it is copyrightable?
Yeah, I thought it was a copyright. Right.
Right.
You can't copyright AI generated, but I mean, don't you think that they're kind of
trace
taking your work a little
You
bit?
can't trace that it's a finger from Harrison Ford in that other image.
I
that you
know, it's a
created.
black box. I mean,
Yeah.
it's very hard to get inside and understand that. That's why I wonder if we do need to slow down with the implementation here a little bit.
Yeah.
Because I want to defend the creative work of human beings like you.
Yeah.
Do you feel the same way?
100%, yes. No, we don't want to implement it too soon because we aren't thinking about it. We aren't stopping and going, wait a second. We have people who, really want to use it all the time, and then there are those of us that are like, it's a great tool, and we'll use it when it's necessary, but we can't let it take over our lives just yet. It's too soon.
So when it makes a song that combines, The Weeknd and Drake, I know who they are. I mean, like, The Weeknd and Drake are doing fine. They're probably like laughing along with this, but imagine you're a struggling artist, and all of a sudden, kind of a grain of your work ends up in an AI program, but it's not really traceable. I mean, I don't know how.
Well, that's sampling, right?
Yeah.
Wasn't that was the problem in the 90s, right? With sampling, when people were using little bits of song and not retreating it back to the original artist, and then they
That's
would
how
end
I
up
feel.
in
And Universal Music Group wasn't a big fan either. They said, no, thank you, shut it down.
Yeah, right. So this could end up in court. This certainly could end up in court
Yes.
pretty quickly. And that might be one way we get more guardrails. I don't know. Josh, anything to add there?
I mean, there's huge implications of sampling and using content in different ways, like music, for example. It is still early days. I'm helping a friend put together a music video using Midjourney as almost like a stop motion animation in a way. It's totally time consuming. It's taken hours to do. It is not something that you're doing at a high quality really quickly. So, I mean, it is early.
But cheaper than doing a music video shoot.
Yeah,
And
true.
fast. And fast, right?
Yeah.
I'm less in the slow down camp and more in the keep it going, but figure out how to make it equitable to everybody who's participating and creating the value. So, for example, if your blog posts, if your images are being used as part of these models, finding ways to compensate people and compensate the organizations whose work is essentially being taken for a free ride by all these AI companies.
I did promise the gentleman in the back. Let's make sure we get a comment. There's here. Oh my gosh, this poor gentleman in the back had his hand up too. Go ahead, sir.
This is for Josh. First, great-looking footwear. Yes, what would you recommend for your promoting loyalty? The top 3 examples you could share.
For promoting loyalty, we're in a space where we're trying to build out platforms that reward loyalty. So, for instance, I think Sephora has an incredibly great loyalty program, and their customers are obsessed with it. So if there's a way to modernize that and put that, whether it's on the blockchain or there's some sort of reward for in crypto, that's amazing. We do a lot of work with banks for travel and shopping. So everyone loves a good discount on an Apple product. So we help people power that. I think definitely that if we did this event 9 months ago, we would be talking nonstop about Web3. We didn't mention it once. Like that kind of came and went, and that was supposed to be a place for loyalty. It may come through at some point. The metaverse kind of came and went, but there's a couple other platforms out there that drive that. It's all about people's passion areas. Are you really into travel? Are you into shopping? And ultimately, our platform will help drive that. Yeah, it's the old gamification.
And in the back, sir, go ahead.
A couple of different points. Just to pick up on one of the things you guys were saying earlier, those of us of a certain age, pre-internet, and then watched it develop, watched it change our lives. But in the beginning, we all thought that it would satisfy a human quest for information. And we all made a mistake. We didn't realize that the more dominant human desire is for affirmation. And almost everything that you guys are describing with brand loyalty and everything else is, we missed it. When it was being created, we completely missed it. When we were talking before and you asked the question about what careers in the future are of meaning, and then we also think about things that AI is probably going to take a role in, it's probably healthcare, and no one here has said healthcare once. I know it's an important topic for the university because I believe it's going to try and expand more in healthcare in the coming years. But I'm wondering what your thoughts are there, because aging, retirement, and healthcare that industry is left behind by almost all the developments we've talked about in the last 15, 20 minutes.
Just briefly, as much as I am I lean pessimistic on AI, I'm very optimistic about what AI could do for medicine and healthcare. So let's go across the panel here. Luis?
Sure. Well, we have a pretty well documented shortage of labor in healthcare. So AI will hopefully help us bend the cost curve related to that down a bit. All the things around, like anything involving some kind of image, right? Reviewing image, any sort of cancer detection, condition detection, summarizing all of the thousands of data points that doctors have to look at to then understand something, much like seeing an asteroid fly through space and trying to understand what's happening with it. AI can help with all those things. So very bullish there.
Josh?
I think we all probably agree that wave 1 of the internet was information, wave 2 was social, and wave 3 is now creator, getting into that creator space. So there's a lot of these tools are helping with that. And then I think a lot of the work we did with at ServiceNow was helping power workflows that could be automated for healthcare. So whether that's getting faster access to doctors, getting faster information about medicines, there's definitely some tools out there that should help in the healthcare space.
When you asked the question before about what do you see a career in 10, 20, 30, what comes to mind is healthcare, honestly, and not a creative field. Into just because I feel like that is always will be needed, whether it's AI supported or just doctors and nurses to help patients. I think that's a definitely viable career choice.
Healthcare, I think it's very synergistic, almost analogous to what we do in space, right? I envision, and I've seen already progress in healthcare with AI and ML being applied to things like image analysis, early detection, but there's always a human in the loop somewhere verifying and then checking that data at the end. And I think that's great if AI can help, identify things that maybe you're too tired to see. Maybe it's 7 p.m. and you're going through a million images and you miss one. AI doesn't get tired, right? But there has to be a human in the loop. Just like I talked about, for space, if we have instruments observing some planetary object, planetary body, flyby, the scientists are going to want to be in the loop, even if AI does a little bit of it.
I think the way you've constructed that, though, is profound. The notion that we thought information would be what people grabbed onto, and affirmation. I was driving to New York City with a friend who the digital map app said, there's too much traffic on this bridge, let's go. And he said, nah, there's never traffic there. I said, it's looking at it in real time. He said, no, trust me. And we sat in traffic and we missed where we were going. He ignored it. He wanted the affirmation of saying he was right. That's a remarkable point. I appreciate that, and it's one that it's a lesson 30 years later we better be learning, I think. And I also hope that the audience appreciates just as I do. We could be here all day, but Imagine has so many things that I know that you're all going to be headed to. Can we give a round of applause to this remarkable panel? They've asked me to say just how honored I am to be here and how there are exhibits everywhere. You heard the president say that, so please enjoy the rest of the day, and thank you for coming out, and we will see you, I hope, at next Imagine. Cheers.